Welcome. My name is Steve Bartelbaugh, and we have a very special live presentation today on City Channel 16. For those of you who have been watching, we have been in the midst of a marathon where we've been playing back the 4 budget workshops that have been conducted here in Evanston. Today, though, in this afternoon or early evening, we'd like to have a chance to have you, the viewer, sound off and let us know what you think and questions that you might have about the budget workshop. The calls will be taken from our call team who are located outside in our office. If you'll leave your first name, they will take the information and then we will try to get as many questions on air as possible during the next 60 minutes. The phone number is area code 847-869-2510. But to answer those questions, we have to have a couple people who know what's going on. And of course, we turn to the city manager, Wally Bobkiewicz, and the assistant city manager, Marty Lyons. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
And thank you. Thank you for putting this together this evening.
You're welcome. Like I said, it's kind of a unique setup. We want as many people as possible have a chance to kind of have their input. And of course, that's been part of what the situation has been with these workshops. Explain a little bit about the idea behind the community budget workshops.
Sure. Really, we wanted to make sure that the community has as much opportunity as possible to provide input to the budget. We're facing a difficult budget year. We've been talking about a number of about $8 million. Unfortunately, it looks like that number is going to be a little bit higher as we are in the final days and weeks in putting together a budget. So we're looking to make some substantial changes to the city budget. And we knew this back in September and October, and Marty and I brought to the council a plan to have a series of community workshops, which we conducted during the month of November to get citizen input. And your viewers have been able to watch those workshops over the last 3 days. We've asked people, in addition to participate in that, we have a website, cityofevanston.org/budget, to allow people to go and see the results of that, provide their input either by voting on the top suggestions of the community process. So we've gotten almost 1,000 people to vote on those suggestions. And so hopefully through this input tomorrow evening at the City Council at a special meeting, the facilitator that has done this, the process, will be making a presentation to the Council of the final results. And then we have a couple of weeks to finish the proposed budget.
Yeah, I guess we should get everybody an idea of what the timetable is here. So as you said, the workshops now have concluded, including our last one that was over at City Hall. And now we're in the next stage of the process where there'll actually be numbers coming out from the city before the end of the year.
Right. We're responsible to submit a budget to the City Council by December 31. Given the holidays, we're going to submit a document to the council and to our staff members on the 18th, so a week from Friday, and then have the full document prepared and presented by December 31st.
Okay. And then in January it goes to the council?
Yeah, the council will formally receive it again December 31, and then there'll be a series of budget workshops for the council to deliberate and receive citizen comment during the month of January. We're going to be going to the council tomorrow evening to get a reconfirmation of the dates of those and make sure those are available for members of the public.
Good. And then finally, once and for all, it becomes official March 1st.
That's correct.
Okay. Marty, tell me a little bit of how you thought this process went. Was this the first time you've worked with budget workshops with the community?
This is the first time I've been involved in a public session such as this. We noted that this flips the process a little bit, and that was our goal. In many cases, Illinois communities do a public hearing almost at the end of a budget process. Yeah. And in that regard, that's when you have most of the decisions already made and you're telling the public, here's what we've decided. And we're definitely way on the other end of the curve. So I think this has been very successful. We've heard a lot of valuable input from the residents.
How will the public's input be rolled into the proposed budget? I know we've talked about the website that folks have been able to log on and vote for what they think are the most important areas for cuts. How does it actually come together and where you say, okay, this is what the public wants, but then this is, let's say, what our city staff wants?
Well, it's ultimately my responsibility as the city manager to submit a proposed budget. So that's what we're in the process. And so the input of the community has been very important. It's informed our internal discussions. We've also went out to our staff and asked our staff early in this process during the month of November what their ideas were. And we came with a document of 22 pages of additional ideas from our staff. So we're calling all this together really so we can present a budget to the City Council in a couple of weeks that is mindful of the deficit that we're facing now, probably closer to $9 or $9.5 million from $8 million. To be mindful of that, but also to be mindful that whatever changes we propose to the City Council take into account the community standards of Evanston, because ultimately people pay in their taxes to get community services back. We want to make sure that whatever changes are made to the budget in order for the budget to be balanced, reflect those changes. So we're trying to call all that together. We'll present it to the City Council. They're the ultimate arbiters. They're the folks that are elected by the residents of Evanston, and then hopefully, and the end of this process will be a budget that's not only balanced, but will also still reflect the needs of the community.
Now, Marty, you were here for last year's budget process. Give me a little bit of the differences between last year and this year.
I think the biggest difference is the economy really has proven out that it's settled into this lower level, if you will. So we have confirmation of revenues that are much lower, and from that knowledge, it changed our process quite a bit. So our process now is to make sure we've identified our resources, and the first thing we then did was establish our baseline, and what the city manager just referred to, our deficit. It is telling everyone if we continue our business as usual, we're at $9.5 million. Well, we don't plan to continue business as usual, and there's a lot of other companies that have done the same thing. So that's been the biggest difference from last year. Last year was let's continue on our budget process and try to move through these difficult times. This year is we do have difficult times that will continue for another year, and we need to make long-term plans to address those.
Yeah, I think some people would have asked about the one-time fixes. That term comes up a lot, especially in reference to last year's budget. Not to second guess, but was there anything in the process last year that you would do differently, I guess, looking at what we're going into this year?
Given the parameters, no, because our parameters were no layoffs, keep services where they were, and in order to do that, we needed to look at all types of revenues to keep our budget as balanced as possible. Were those parameters changed, then we could have looked at different revenue options, reduced our revenues and reduced expenses at that time. But living within the parameters that were set, I think we did the best we could, and we needed to use one-time revenues to continue services long enough to say, now we've had a chance to evaluate them, and let's look at the long term.
Okay, gentlemen, let's get into a little bit about some of the specifics of the local budget. The police and fire pension issue has been one at the top of the list, and it has caused some difficulty in trying to balance a budget. How do you address these issues, and what steps are kind of being taken to eliminate that cost?
Well, first, the numbers that we're looking at are in the $150, $160 million range as far as a deficit. And a deficit, I think it's important for people to understand that it's a deficit of full funding. If every retiree that's currently out, every employee who could be eligible for retire were to retire tomorrow and needed to be paid, what actuaries do is figure out what that number should be. It's a little bit of an unrealistic number, but obviously we want to make sure that those hardworking police officers and firefighters, when the time comes that they are retired or are retired and want to continue to be paid over the course of their life, that the money is there. We've looked at what Springfield has tried to do to make some adjustments. There was some discussions during the month of October in the General Assembly to make some changes on dates and some changes on how the dollars would impact us. None of those things came to fruition. So we have a piece of the property tax levy that Marty can speak to a little bit more specifically that goes toward that. But we're also looking as part of this budget, is there an opportunity to put additional resources that maybe we're spending on other things right now and shift that over to the police and fire pension fund? And Marty, maybe you can talk a little bit about the portion of the levy, the property tax levy, that currently goes in that direction.
Currently, there's about 1/3 of the levy that's devoted towards property taxes. So of our $38 million tax levy, a little bit less than 1/3 goes to police and fire pension. And that will continue. We gave the council a long-term report that noted that would continue to increase for the next several years, regardless of our investment performances. We'll continue to increase our funding to cover our costs for pension and to catch up. So it's at 1/3. It will continue to increase if we choose to keep using property tax levies for that funding. And it may change, as the manager pointed out, if we have changes in our funding procedures, our funding requirements. But right now, we will need to count on the fact that in order to catch up with our pension, that will be a continued increasing bite, and where it comes from is our general fund. That's the only reason to talk about it this evening, is that as the pension levy goes up, it impacts the operational levy that's left over.
Okay. Talk about revenues, money's coming in. I'm sure people will be interested in learning a little bit more about TIFs. Some people may not know exactly what a TIF is, but we know that that's the way revenue comes to town, often when buildings are being put up in the downtown. What's Evanston's situation with the current TIFs, and will that be an area of revenue?
We have 6 TIFs as of today. And
what does TIF stand for?
Tax Increment Finance Districts. These are economic development tools authorized by the state of Illinois, wherein we can aggregate property tax levy, just the growth of a property tax levy in one district. So we have 6 TIF districts, and one will close, and it will be one of the most successful TIF districts for a suburban community in the state's history. There'll be a lot of them closing in the next 10 years, since the legislation that allowed for them was in the early 80s, late 70s, so a lot of them will start to close. Our TIFs will bring a continual increase in revenues into those districts. However, that doesn't help our general fund. Our general fund is separate, and while we do take some administrative costs out of TIF districts to make sure they're being run properly, that's really a separate issue. It will be great news for capital and other expenses related to those districts, whether it be the West Evanston TIF or the Howard Hartree or the downtown remaining TIF, Washington National.
Okay. First of all, let's remind folks who have just tuned in that we are taking questions. If you want to call in and get a question for either Marty or Wally to address, feel free to do so. The phone number here is 847-869-2510. In simple terms, where does the city's revenue come from?
Well, a lot of it comes from property tax. Here in the state of Illinois, there are property tax levies, different lines on people's property tax bill. There are specific lines for the city of Evanston. There are specific lines for the school districts, other taxing entities. So by and large, this is still the major source of revenue that really all subdivisions, cities, villages, towns in the state of Illinois receive. So we look at that, obviously the impact on the economy, the reassessment of properties has an impact on the levy, and that's something that we work with not only with Evanston Township, but also Cook County on that reassessment, and that's going to be a continuing issue because as we're seeing properties change in price value, sale value, and assessed value, that's going to continue to change. So while we may be able to settle the budget issues this year, we're still going to be looking at changes in assessed valuation here in the city of Evanston. So that's a big piece of this. Evanston has taxes on lots of other things. Maybe, Marty, you could roll through some of the other highlights in addition to the property tax levy.
Sure. In our general fund, the property tax levy is about 20% of the revenues, and we receive another 45% from other taxes, sales taxes, utility taxes. We share in the state income tax. We get 1/10 of the income tax paid in, but not based on the amount we pay in as Evanston residents. It is shared back on a per capita basis, but we do get approximately $6 million in income tax receipts. So taxes, by and large, are our largest source of operating revenue, but we do receive fees for charges for services. Excuse me, and the largest one for that would be in the general fund. Our Parks, Forestry, and Recs division receives over $3 million in fees for direct services provided to residents.
Okay. Do you guys have an idea, ballpark, where you may come in as a possible tax increase, or will there be one in this budget?
The tax levy has already been set this year, so the only change to the tax levy that was recently adopted was the inclusion of the closing of the downtown to TIF. So that we estimated that would raise $1.7 million in taxes paid to the city, but those taxes were being paid into the downtown to TIF fund. So in effect, there is no increase resulting from that TIF dissolving. So this year, there was no recommendation for a tax increase for property taxes for the city.
Gentlemen, we got our first question from one of our viewers. Mark asks, what is the possibility of merging Evanston with Skokie? That's thinking outside the box a little. I don't know what you would call it, Skevinston, right?
Yeah. Well, certainly there are opportunities to do that. I think on a practical scale, That's probably not something that we're going to see anytime soon. I think, really one of the hallmarks of local government is local sovereignty, and cities, both the Village of Skokie, the City of Evanston, date back, to the 1860s, 1870s in their organization. I think, though, that one of the things that we are looking at is what we can do to work closer with our neighbors. We provide a lot of municipal services, so does the Village of Skokie, so does the Village of Wilmette, so does Lincolnwood. We're looking and have been talking with those communities to say, what are things that we do that we may perhaps offer to you, the other villages and towns around us, that may make fiscal sense. And so we would, in essence, be contracting in. A lot of talk about contracting out services, but we think given the breadth of what we do, there's some opportunities for contracting in services. And again, have been initial discussions with all three of the communities that surround us, with the exception of the City of Chicago. My sense is there probably not a lot of interest in us contracting in services for the City of Chicago. But also another area as far as contracting in services is our water utility. And a lot of discussion during the community budget workshops about our water utility. We currently sell water to the Village of Skokie and to a group of communities in western Cook County known as the Northwest Water Commission. It's the cities of Arlington Heights, Palatine, Buffalo Grove, and one more, and we'll think of it as the evening progresses. So there are opportunities for us to further that sale of water. Obviously, Lake Michigan's a tremendous resource. We're not moving as a community. We continue to have a water treatment facility that has great capacity. So are there opportunities for us to make money from the sale of water? So I think that, again, something that's been talked about a lot through the workshops, and I think, again, from a contracting in standpoint, something we'll talk more about.
Okay, we kind of led into this area. What percentage of the tax bill is designated for city services, and does that only cover the general fund?
Approximately, it was 19.9 plus, so 20% of a resident's tax bill, and there could be some differences if you were in a given park district above and beyond our parks area. So we have the Lighthouse Park District. Your tax bill may be a little bit different, but 20% of the tax bill is for the city, and of that, approximately 40% of our 20% goes to the general fund. So only about 8% of the tax bill goes to pay for police, fire, public works, parks, forestry, library services.
Obviously, at that point, there has to be cuts. The tough question, what services will you cut? And I guess how it will affect in-house at the city itself.
Sure. Let maybe start walking through some of the recommendations that came out of the community budget workshop process, because really one of the things I want to do tonight is, again, highlight that process, encourage people to go to our website, cityofelvanston.org/budget, an opportunity to vote on some of these ideas. Also, they can send emails to us, budget@cityofelvanston.org. Before we move on, though, I want to make sure I get straight for the record our partners in the Northwest Water Commission, and that is the villages of Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Palatine, and Wheeling. So
Wheeling.
Wheeling was the fourth one that I didn't get. Probably the number one thing that people talked about, the recommendations that came out of the community budget workshop process, was personnel, and that at least the feeling of those residents that participated in the process said, don't look at taxes, look at your existing staff. And of course, that's a very difficult thing to do. We have about 900 men and women who work very diligently on behalf of the City of Evanston, everything from police and fire to library to health, parks and recreation, and all aspects of things that we do. But when you look at our budget and you look at the very high percentage, it's what, Marty?
We have, of the general fund, 75% of the costs in it are personnel related.
So 75% of our costs are personnel. It's going to be very difficult. I'll just say it's going to be impossible for us to do this without reducing the number of employees that are working for us. So we are looking at opportunities first and foremost on how we can make adjustments in our workforce that will have those minimal impact on the services we provide the residents of Evanston. So that's really our first priority. We're also looking, quite honestly, at the benefit packages of our employees, seeing are there opportunities to make adjustments at that. We have bargaining agreements with many of our employees through employee groups, police, fire, general government, but there will be opportunities for us to make some adjustments there. things like furloughs and
yeah, let's talk about that. Can you furlough
days.
staff or close buildings such as the Civic Center or the recreation centers, and would that help cut less staff?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I think, again, it's a balance. What do we do to help balance the budget, but what also do we do to make sure the people who are paying fairly significant taxes to the city of Evanston still get the services that they expect for those taxes? And so that's the balancing process. I think one of the benefits of the community budget workshops is has given us a little bit of a roadmap, at least from the feelings of those residents that participated, on some services we may need to make some adjustments to help us get where we need to go.
All right, let's take a step back. We got a question from Doris, who's watching, and she said, if any changes are made to the police department and fire pension, how will the people currently receiving these pensions be affected?
There would be no change. The pension benefits are set by the state of Illinois. They are not set by the city of Evanston. So we basically pay based on formula that's set by the state. So anyone who's currently a police officer and firefighters, pension benefits that they have and the program formulas associated with that would stay. Lots of discussion in Springfield this fall and probably after the first of the year. Is there a way to perhaps alter the benefit for new folks, for folks who would be coming into the police service or fire service, but there would be no change of benefits to existing police officers and firefighters?
And just on that one, it's important to note that even that change, if we were able to adopt a change that was for personnel hired after X date, that will have a tremendous impact on our $158 million pension liability because it won't grow any longer, and we will keep funding.
Yeah.
So even that type of a change will have a benefit to the city's long-term financial condition, any city's long-term financial condition. And that's pretty much how private sector firms went about getting rid of their defined benefit pensions. They said date certain and then moved forward.
Yeah. Okay, Doris had a follow-up question, not on that topic, but a little something, and also Judith gave us a question, so we're going to get to that one. But let me ask the follow-up that Doris had about council recently voting for a green city. I guess the financial aspect of this is that last year a lot of money was spent purchasing a green roof, approximately, I think she says $300,000. Is that about right?
Maybe the water that they're referring to, and I would have to research that because I didn't think it was that high. But.
Well, the gist of it was if the city is moving towards becoming more green, how will it impact the current spending, and is this the wisest thing to spend money on at this financial time?
Well, the city is very committed. The city council's adopted 12 goals for 2010. One of them is to continue to move forward with the implementation of the Climate Action Plan. We have a very talented individual on our staff, Carolyn Colopy, who is our sustainability coordinator. She's basically a one-person band working on a lot of these initiatives, but working with volunteers. And I think another theme that you're going to see in this budget is how can we use the residents of Evanston to help us with a lot of the different municipal services. We have Citizens for a Greener Evanston now who are really in the forefront of working on some of our green initiatives. So I don't think we're going to need to look at so much as having a lot of city staff involved in programs, especially things like a green initiative, where we can harness the value and the service of our volunteers. So at this point, I think we are looking at the water treatment plant. I believe we got a grant for some solar panels, which we're moving forward with. That's really the only green roof project that I'm aware of. We are looking at re-roofing the Civic Center, but not specifically toward a green bent.
Okay.
And we do have an approximately $750,000 energy grant. So this would be money that is not really in the mix with the general fund. If anything, it's when we have staff that can work on these projects and move forward with very important projects. They're on the council's top 12 list, but they're being funded through this grant. So we will focus on those through this next year at least as a way of managing all of the funds available to us.
Yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit more about grants and other monies that come in a little bit later. But I do want to get to another question. Judith asked, why hasn't the city considered a municipal employee tax for all government employees that don't live in Evanston? We know that a report came out a little while back showing that a number of folks don't live in the community. This would include employees from other government entities such as the school districts, et cetera, and it would be a tax on their income. Is that a legitimate request?
Well, certainly it's a legitimate request. I think the question is the legality of it and what we could do under Illinois state law, especially for municipal employees. I think the challenge is how do you tax employees that work for you.
Yeah.
But we did do a survey just recently. About 2/3 of our employees live outside of the city of Evanston. I think the whole issue of taxes is one that we're trying to kind of not spend a lot of time focusing on for this budget, because we think that the council's heard clear, we've heard clear through the community budget workshops, is the taxes, additional taxes are not the answer to this budget. We need to work smarter, work leaner, and I think we're going to focus on that.
Okay. Well, Mamie also called in with a question. Hers is in that same vein. So what considerations is made for an employee tax, for example, implementing a 1% tax for employees who are residents and 1.5 for non-residents? And that kind of falls under, I'm assuming, the same response.
Sure, and Marty can speak a little bit more to this, maybe more broadly in communities taxing businesses that are here per
Certainly.
employees.
I think Chicago is the biggest example of a community that has a head tax. And with the Loop and that large employment center, they do have a tax that companies do pay. And we have looked at it in the past. I don't have the specific numbers as to what a head tax would raise. For the most part, when it's been looked at in the past, it was for larger employers over a certain dollar amount, because it would represent a hardship as far as processing goes. So that has been considered for the city in the past. I'll go back to what the manager just stated, is that our concern is more on the expense side, and going back to the municipal employee side is more to look at this year, no raises. Would there be any decreases for certain types of employees in their salaries?
Yeah.
So in effect, getting to the same area that the resident was asking about.
If you face those cuts with employees, do you have a union issue?
Sure, absolutely. Many of our employees are represented through bargaining units, and so depending on the type of thing that we'd be talking about, many of our groups have contracts that are up at the end of the current fiscal year. We currently don't have a contract at all with our police officers group. That expired, back in March 1st of this year. So I think as these initiatives are proposed, every group of employees will need to be treated a little bit differently, because we do have a collective bargaining process for many of them.
Gotcha. Couple areas where people have brought up in the past, closing of a fire station or a branch library. Both those things on the table?
Yes. Both were raised during the community budget workshop process, and we feel an obligation. I feel an obligation to bring forward to the council at least discussion of both those issues, looking at reductions in fire service, also reductions in library service. We want to make sure that the community is safe. And again, another key point that came out of the community budget workshops were that we want basic services taken care of. And I certainly would think police, fire, roads, those are the basic services that we provide as a city. Other services beyond that probably are less basic. So as we look at the fire department, our first priority is going to make sure that the residents of Evanston are safe, that our firefighters are safe, that they have the proper equipment that they need to do their job. On the library side, we have a tremendous library system here in the city of Evanston, with a downtown branch and then two additional branches, one on Central, one on Chicago Avenue. And we need to make sure that the monies that we're spending on those services match community priorities with the backdrop of a $8 to $9 million budget deficit. So those issues are on the table, and we'll continue to hear. And I think it's important for members of the public who feel strongly about these issues to let the city know. Again, through our website, through email, people are not shy here in the city of Evanston about letting their mayor.
It has been a very democratic process, and that really is, I think, what you're aiming
Absolutely. That this is the community for all of us, and my job is to try to put together packages that make sense for the mayor and the city council to consider. We've got very talented individuals on the city council who want to represent their community, but it's all about democracy, and we're in the democracy business. And part of this process, part of tonight, part of the workshops is making sure that the residents of Evanston are heard.
Great. It's Sunday night. If you're at home and you just tuned in, we are live at the Evanston Media Center on the City Channel tonight. We are discussing the budget here in Evanston, and we're going to be going till 7 o'clock, and we are taking phone calls. The phone number is 847. What's the number? 869-2510. It's always a killer when you forget that on a live show. As a matter of fact, it's probably the perfect time to take a short break. We're going to take about 2 minutes, but we're still accepting your calls during the break. So we'll be right back with more here on the Budget Workshop follow-up.
Should be.
Hello, my name is Yvonne Thomas. I am the Director of Evanston Health and Human Services Department. Today, I'm going to share information with you regarding H1N1, swine influenza or swine flu. Swine flu is a respiratory disease of pigs caused by type A influenza virus that is spread from pigs to people and people to people. This happens the same way as seasonal flu occurs in people, which is mainly person-to-person transmission through coughing and sneezing. Swine flu viruses are not transmitted by food. You cannot get swine flu from eating pork or pork products. Symptoms of swine flu are the same as regular seasonal influenza and can include fever, lethargy, lack of appetite, and coughing. Some people have also reported runny nose, sore throat, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. If you or a family member are experiencing any of these symptoms, you should stay home from work or school and limit your contact with others to prevent the spread of any illness. If your symptoms persist or worsen for more than 48 hours, this is the time to seek medical attention. There is no vaccine available right now to protect against swine flu, but there are everyday actions that can help prevent the further spread of germs. Wash your hands. Wash your hands often with soap and water, especially after you cough or sneeze. Cover your nose and mouth with a tissue when you cough or sneeze and throw the tissue in the trash after you use it. Mainly, try to avoid close contact with sick people. If you have any questions, please call the Health and Human Services Department at 847-866-2969. Again, that number is 847-866-2969.
We are back, and I am Steve Bartelbaugh here at the Evanston Media Center. We're live on the City Channel, Channel 16. Can let your friends know if they're interested in participating in getting their voice heard in regards to the Evanston budget for 2009. I have Wally Bobkiewicz, the city manager, and Marty Lyons, the assistant city manager, with me. And gentlemen, we were talking a little bit while we were in the break about what really came up on the list during those budget workshops. And I think we can take a look. We might be able to get a better idea of what was actually the community needs.
Yes, and we've got a laptop up, and if people are interested, what I'm looking at right now is the report of the facilitator that came out from the workshops, and that is on our city budget website, cityofevanston.org/budget. And what the group did is prioritize some cuts, proposed cuts. The number one was personnel cuts as necessary in some combination of reductions of people and hours, to change solid waste recycling and yard waste collection that may involve privatization, changes and costs associated with yard waste collection. This is something that the City Council has been talking about for a while, but they've had three separate discussions during 2009 about this. We have a special meeting tomorrow evening. Part of it is to receive the results of these budget workshops, but earlier in the evening, beginning at 6 o'clock, the Council's Administration and Public Works Committee is going to be continuing a discussion they've had on changes to both refuse recycling and green waste. Staff has proposed to flip-flop how we currently collect those services.
Yeah, take a second on that. I know that was brought up that there's a way that there could be some more funding coming in, if you will, from this new service.
Right. We think we can provide the service more cost-effectively by having city staff collect recycling. Currently we have a contractor doing that, and then switch the refuse collection from city staff to a contractor. So that's part of a mix of proposals we have before the City Council. There's also then the question of yard waste. How can we more effectively pick it up, and how can we more effectively get the funding needed to do that? So the council talked a little bit about the idea of the bags. Many people will put their trash or their green waste in bags, but would we perhaps sell stickers? Some North Shore communities will sell a sticker. You get a sticker, you have to put the sticker on the bag.
Right.
So that discussion again has been going on during most of 2009. Council talked about it 2 weeks ago. We'll be talking about it again tomorrow evening. So that's as a second item. Move Township offices to the Civic Center. The Township currently has offices elsewhere in Evanston, so would there be an opportunity to save some money there? Sell water to more communities, which we've talked about. Close branch libraries, which we've talked about. Examine sale of parking garages and parking passes for garages. These would be specifically our parking garages in the downtown. Are there opportunities really to make additional revenue from them? We have some difficulties filling up the garage, especially during the day. Are there creative ways for us to be focused on that? The fire station we've talked about. Consider Fine Arts Development District on the lakefront, city-owned. The City Council has this as one of their goals to look at lakefront development. They recently talked about that and gave pretty clear direction that they're not interested in any further development. So while this came out of the community process, I think the direction from the council is very clear that we're not going there. Increase employee benefit contributions. We talked a little bit about that. Cut management by 10% across the board. We've talked a little bit about that. Refinance our current debt. The city has a variety of debt. Marty, about how much feeds back to the general fund?
We have approximately $150 million, a little bit more, in general obligation debt that is paid for from property taxes. So in that regard, it's taking from the same source that we use for general operating.
Okay.
Share contract regional municipal services. We talked about that in the first half hour. And then to encourage business commercial development over residential development. Certainly both residential development and business commercial development bring in different kinds of dollars to the community. We have a new community development director starting tomorrow. Lehman Walker, who's coming to us from University City, Missouri. So one of his.
Did he know what he was getting into?
I think he did, but certainly he's coming at a very busy time here in Evanston. So that just gives you and the viewing audience a little bit of an idea of what those recommendations were. And again, on our city budget website, people can go and find all of these things. They can vote. I can actually bring up the vote tally sheet that we have. If people want to vote on the recommendations, people can participate online, and put in their email address and vote. Okay, we're at an even 1,000 people right now. We were at, I think, about 990 when we came on the air this evening. So, so hopefully this discussion is getting people to vote, and we'll share with the City Council the results of this. We have a very sharp IT staff at the City of Evanston. They've made sure that people cannot electronically stuff the ballot box, so to speak. So there are some safeguards put in on that. But so far we've had 1,000 people so far.
That's great.
And this has been up for about a week. So that's great that people are getting involved.
Absolutely. You mentioned the council members. Did you get any input? I know a couple were at some of the workshops. Is their role mostly to watch at this point until they actually are presented with it?
Right. The council back in September reviewed what this process would be, and it was their decision to let this be a community process, that they would attend as observers but not as participants, because the council made it clear they really wanted to get that feedback from the residents. So you're absolutely right. I think we saw most all of the council members
at one time or the other.
At one time or another at all of the various workshops. And again, their piece of this is coming up. It's been the community piece, it's been the staff piece, it's been the management team's piece. All of this to serve the Evanston City Council, to give them the best data they can to make some very difficult decisions.
Absolutely. We did get another call with a question. I want to throw this one out there before it gets too late. Question was, has there been any thought given to renegotiating the lease for the Evanston Arts Center located on the lakefront? Would it help recruit more rent money and lessen the cost of rehabbing the facility?
Yes and yes.
Okay. Okay. Are there other area buildings that have also been under the microscope that would fall under the same category as the Arts Center?
Well, I think we look at the buildings and then the facilities that we operate. Our Parks and Recreation Department has 4 community centers, Levy, Chandler, Fleetwood, and Robert Crown.
Robert Crown. I was already thinking about a different subject. I think, so sorry you had me on.
Wheeling. Oh wait, no wait. That's
no. I was just on a different building.
Yeah.
So we certainly looking. I don't suspect that we'll make any changes in this budget round with those buildings. We have some other with the Ecology Center.
The recycling center was
the recycling center is a part of the discussions we've been having on refuse, recycling, and green waste. That with all of those, we would propose closing the recycling center now that we've got the curbside recycling. Most everyone, except the very southern part of Evanston, has the larger blue recycling containers, and the last.
And by the way, people love those. Can I tell you that? They're wonderful.
But people have also complained they didn't want to get rid of their orange ones.
Yeah,
and so people can, if you haven't gotten, for the folks who live in the 8th and 9th wards who haven't gotten their blue cans, yeah, you can keep your orange cans. We're happy to have you keep your orange cans for in-house recycling efforts, and we will have an opportunity to make those orange cans available.
Yep.
Many of them are no longer in a condition to be used, but some of them we collected back are, and we're going to get those back out in the community after the first
Recycle
year.
the recycling bins.
Recycle the recycling bins, yes.
Jeannie has a question. I think you actually addressed this a few minutes ago, but let me just make sure that it was clear. Has there been discussion since the last election about dissolving the Township Assessor's Office? And I believe you just said that could be something that could be hosted within the city.
Well, the office, there's the office of the various township officials, and then there's the physical office space.
Okay.
And so the issue that came up during the community budget process, I think, was more the physical office space than it was the offices, the elected offices themselves.
Okay.
Evanston is one of, I think, 4 contiguous townships to municipal jurisdictions in the state of Illinois, 3 or 4 or 5. It's a small number. And at least one other community in the recent past has gone to Springfield to ask the legislature to formally fold in the township into the city or village that had the same jurisdictional boundaries. So that has been discussed as an option. The city council serves as the board of directors. Is that the proper term? The board of directors of Evanston Township.
Board of Trustees.
Board of Trustees.
Now, one of the things that we have done, though, as far as the merging of, last year the township agreed to contribute $300,000 towards what we term as community paid services for our mental health board. And this year they're going to do the same. So in some respect, we've already begun the process of merging city and county, township.
We don't want to
city
merge with Cook
services.
County.
No, we do not. So we've already begun that process, and we are very grateful to the members of the township for their work on this area as well.
The assessor position in general is one of the, I would assume one of the main job responsibilities is basically helping folks with tax issues. Is that really primarily what the office is for?
I've not been here long enough to get a good overview of what the township assessor's role is.
That is the township assessor, that's their role. They are not actually the ones that are out there assessing. That is the county function. So our township assessor acts more as an ombudsman to try and help people through the process when it's not going well, or to help people understand that process.
Gotcha. You mentioned earlier a little bit about grants, talking in regards to the green issue. Are there other grants or monies from the state and federal government that will be worth pursuing?
Well, one of the things that I think we need to really focus on in this new budget, we've been talking a lot about things that we will likely stop doing or not do as much as we have. There are a few things, though, that we need to do more of, and one of those areas is in raising money, non-tax money for the city of Evanston. We need to have a better presence both in Springfield and in Washington to get our fair share of state dollars and federal dollars that come our way. We also need to do a better job of working with our neighbors, not only neighboring communities, but also the regional transit agencies, the CTA, the RTA, Metra, PACE, and we don't really have a staff function to do that. So I think in this new budget you will likely see some new initiatives to help us bring money from all those various agencies. We have people who work on grants. I think we need to continue to focus on that. I also think there's opportunities for us to raise money. Yeah. Lots of nonprofits will have development folks who work to raise money for them. I think there's probably an opportunity for the city of Evanston to have someone come on board and help us raise money. As we were talking about the Robert Crown Center, the council has given us direction to move forward with a request for qualifications for a public-private partnership for a reconstruction or a complete new building at that site. There might be additional opportunities for help with that from the private sector. But really the police and fire departments, many communities will have foundations that support the operation or capital equipment. Yeah. So I think we need to do whatever we can to generate additional non-tax revenue for the residents of Evanston.
Not to stray off topic too far, but just the other night the CTA Purple Line meeting drew a very big crowd, about 100 people. Again, obviously the community of Evanston has always shown that it's very proactive. What kind of response do you think folks will have for this budget in regards to coming to City Hall and making comments when this budget gets placed before them?
Oh, I hope people do come out. I think the tradition has generally been people come out because there's something of concern that is proposed to be cut. I think one of the good things about this budget process is that people have largely come without set agendas. The participants, we started with about, 75, which dwindled to about 40 as the process continued. There really was not anyone there who was saying, I'm here because I'm a library supporter and I don't care about anything else. I just want to focus on libraries. I think everyone became very invested in the whole welfare of the community, and so there was not any one particular group. My sense is that once very specific proposals are on the table, people will come out. But again, that's the democracy business that we're in. You know, with the budget website, we'll continue that through this process. We obviously are using Channel 16. We have a YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, everything we can do to try to engage people, our residents, because not everybody has the time, even if they want to come to a 7 o'clock meeting or an 8 o'clock meeting at the Civic Center. People's lives are busy, but they still care about the community, so we hope that we can provide different ways for people to provide input. And certainly once the proposed budget is actually issued, we'll continue with the work that we've been doing.
And again, as you mentioned, that YouTube site, City of Evanston, if you look at it search under YouTube, you'll find it. Again, we've been part of that, and we've enjoyed the fact that folks are now putting up meetings and different information that wasn't always available online. So, again, we hope viewers are taking advantage of that. Looks like Dave is taking advantage of our call-ins, and he asks, are there any potential savings in fleet services, either through the leasing of vehicles or group purchasing?
Yes, we already do group purchasing. We work with other communities who have master contracts, so that it either be at the state of Illinois or different counties. We work on group purchasing, and we'll continue to do that as a matter of course. I think one of the things we are looking at with the budget is, are there adjustments that can be made to fleet? We have a great maintenance crew department within our fleet services division. We will maintain everything from trash trucks to fire engines to sedans to all sorts of light and medium weight vehicles, trucks. And so I think we have to look, everything's on the table. I mean, there are no sacred cows. One of the things that came out at the very beginning of the community budget process is a lot of skepticism. People saying, well, you're just doing this because there's already a plan in place. You're not going to really listen to what we said. And I think we've tried to make it very clear from the very beginning, there are no sacred cows. So we want to continue to provide the best service we can to the residents of Evanston, but we have to, given the budget situation we're in, look at everything.
Okay. Let's take
the last year we did reduce the fleet by, I believe it was 13 vehicles, and we have over 300. So it's just a first step in it. But fleet reduction, sharing, pooling, as well as leasing will all be looked at to reduce costs.
In regards to making staff cuts and things like furloughing, does furloughing work, first of all? Do you think the idea of people having less days, so to speak, to work create a situation that keeps people there, or do they eventually say, this is not something I can work under?
Well, the furlough process, different from the layoff process, allows us a flexible solution. We can furlough for 5 days, and those services are decreased for a year. They're not decreased for forever. And there's substantial costs to retool. If we lay off and then rehire, there are a lot of costs to rehire. So the furlough provides some flexibility, and we can look at furloughing on both a facility closed basis and on a staff stretched basis where, yes, we're furloughing, however, we're keeping our hours of operation at the same level.
With revenues, let's say, at some point stabilizing, and in a wonderful world by next year, but more realistically over the next 5 to 10 years, will you restore services? Can that really be something folks can count on? Is there another option?
Well, I think there are many very bad, very sad things about the things we're going through. I mean, one of the small, perhaps good things is that when things do turn around and there is additional revenue, I think it gives the City Council a lot of flexibility to take a step back and say, are we providing the kinds of services we want to provide? Are we providing it in the places that we want to provide? Sometimes with municipal services, you're so place-focused because you have a building. And we've got 4 general recreation centers. We've got a main library, 2 branch libraries. Those have physical places to them. And if you plot them out on a map of City of Evanston, I think many people would say that there are neighborhoods that are not served by any municipal facility. So I think as things get better, I think it gives the council some flexibility not to simply restore what was, but also to look more broadly to say, are there better ways to do things? Are there services we aren't providing? Are there parts of the community we're not touching? And can we use now additional revenues that are coming on to kind of change the focus and change the direction a little bit of the community? So we would, from a staff perspective, look to the council for that direction.
Yeah. I think we're getting close to our final 10 minutes here. So again, if you have a question and you want to call it in, it's 847-869-2510. So grab the phone, give us a quick, brief question. We'll make sure to try and get it on the air before we go off. Obviously, looking forward, people always say, is there a 5-year plan? Is there something where, from now, as far as the fiscal well-being is concerned, you see where Evanston can be? Murray, let me throw it to you first.
Well, we do have a 5-year plan for all of our capital planning. When we look at how we're going to do our streets, where we're going to be doing water mains, those are all planned out on multiple year basis. And also our facilities, which need to be in line for improvement, which need roofs redone, et cetera. As far as a 5-year plan for operations, right now we're in the process of reestablishing a baseline. And I think that with the 12 goals that were just established by the council this fall, along with the reestablishment of baseline services through this budget process, we'll be able to move forward next year during the year and look at long-term planning from a new base. So to say that we'd want one right now, I'd rather have that new base established before we got into a 5-year plan.
Mayor Tisdale has appointed a mayor's budget task force, and she has indicated that her desire is to see that budget task force look toward the future. And I think, as Marty has said, we have a long history of good long-range capital planning, but not so much on the operations side. And what can we do to craft perhaps a 5-year long-range operational plan so that if new revenues are coming in, again, the council can start planning ahead and deciding what direction they want to go even before the revenue arrives, rather than we wake up a budget process next year and say, okay, things have gotten a little better. What do you want to do? So I think it's the mayor's goal to be as proactive as we can so that when things do turn back for the better, that we're prepared to deal with it.
Well, you bring up the mayor, and of course, during the Mayor Morton years, it was always one of the things that she fought was any kind of increase that would have to go back to the citizens, if you will. What's been kind of the interjections of Liz Tisdale?
Well, I think she absolutely agrees. She, first of all, wants to make sure that the services that the residents pay their taxes for are delivered, and delivered in a quality way. I think she also wants to make sure that as we move forward, we look outside the box, that we look to make sure that we're providing services for the residents of Evanston today, not the residents of Evanston 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And those things change and adjust. So her direction and her leadership has been very important, I think, for all of us as we try to look forward and look to the future.
Okay. Got one last question I got here, and that was someone asked, is there any talk about creating a rainy day fund that would represent a certain percentage of the city's operating budget to help stave off some of the adverse effects of a potential future recession worse than what we have now?
Well, the city's had a rainy day fund and has a rainy day fund. We have a reserve fund in our general fund, which, Marty, is approximately what today?
We're probably at about 15%, and which is almost a little bit higher than our minimum, which is 8.5%. So we do have a rainy day fund, and we're counting on that this year. We're going to use part of it this year.
Yeah, we've asked the council back in, was it, I guess, 1st of October, we went to the council to balance the current year. We've been talking a lot about next year, the year beginning March 1, but we're still living through a very difficult year this year that will end on February 28th, and we've asked the council to use $2 million of that rainy day fund, of that general fund reserve, to help us balance our budget, and the council has agreed to that. So we're making additional cuts internally to make up the rest of that difference. We're looking at it still being about a $4 million deficit in the current year. So we're looking at $2 million of savings that we're managing through the year with, and then a $2 million infusion from our rainy day fund. So it's been in place through the stewardship of previous city councils. They have made sure that that money was available. So it is a pretty rainy day right now. So because that money is there, we've had, and there's not been a lot of discussion about it, but we have that flexibility to take that $2 million and help with the current year problem.
And there was a little bit of discussion at the resident budget meetings to make sure that we reestablish that. And it came through in one suggestion that should we try to have a surplus budget wherein we establish funds to both be flexible to do new things, or to make sure that we have that rainy day fund available.
Yeah. Speaking of the budget hearings, anything that came out of them that surprised you?
Someone suggested something from Ann Arbor, Michigan about not having to publish public notices anymore, that there's been some recent case law. I don't know if that's federal case law or just in the state of Michigan. So that was something I had not heard before, and it's something that we're looking at actively right now.
I'd have to say my surprise was, since Evanston's AAA rated by Fitch, that we had a suggestion to declare bankruptcy. While there are some communities that have had to look at that in order to get out of union contracts, not necessarily get out of them, but to say that they cannot afford them. We are a well-run community and well-funded and well-rated, so that one was a surprise.
Yeah, I like that one. Maybe one more time, you can give us a short recap again of how the schedule for the budget proceeds from this day forward, so everybody at home is aware of it and up to speed.
Sure. Maybe we can go to the website since we've got that plugged in. Again, it's cityofevanston.org/budget. Let me refresh it real quick here just to see, so that when we go back to the vote piece, I want to maybe go there. So if you go to the main cityofevanston.org/budget, you'll see about a third of the way down it says Vote Now. So we go there and we look, and at least according to this, no one has voted during the course of the program. So now, hopefully, people once folks have watched this, they can run to their computer and get on and vote. So there's that opportunity there. There are our videos, as we've talked about, the city's on YouTube, and so you can see all of the various budget workshops that are on there. We've got a document schedule. Participate online. If people wish to vote, they can also sign in and register for more extensive comments. They can also send an email to us, budgetinquiries@cityofevanston.org. There's a couple different addresses. We'll get them all. So budgetinquiries@cityofevanston.org. Monday night, tomorrow evening, December the 7th, will be the report of this process to the City Council. Then on Friday, December the 18th, is when I'm planning on announcing sort of the framework of the budget as it will be presented to the City Council. We have some holidays between the 18th and the 31st, so during that time we'll spend to get the final bits of the actual documents themselves, and they'll be released no later than December 31st.
All right, that should give everybody a good idea. Another question I had about the having the workshops, were there any recommendations that were very similar to what you were getting from staff? And if so, were those the ones that may be closer to the top of the list in regards to cuts?
It was, I guess, a real testament to the residents of Evanston how well they know their local government, because many of the things that we heard were certainly things we were hearing from our employees and also among city management. So we've been kind of on parallel tracks on many of these things.
How did you get feedback from the staff? Was it obviously we know this was open to the public? Did the staff also participate in online, or was there a survey in-house?
Well, what we did is we paired up department heads. So we had a department head from one department go to another department and conduct sort of a mini budget workshop with the staff of each of those departments. And Marty, where did you go?
I went to Parks, Forestry, and Recreation.
And so, not being a manager there, Marty was able to go and talk with the staff.
And we did something very similar to what you would have seen in a lot of those pictures. They were broken up into tables. We had a one-page questionnaire that we wanted everyone to take a look at. And then we walked around the room and did a lot of the same with microphone to try and get input from everyone, and even counterpoint. If one staff felt X, we wanted to hear if that was the feeling of the whole group. So
I'm assuming none of them wanted you to claim bankruptcy.
None of them did. Surprisingly enough, we did have a few say that just as the residents did, that we needed to look at staff. Yeah. And that was something that, if you talk about surprises, that was the staff speaking plainly.
And something we're committed to with this process, now that we're coming to the conclusion of this portion of the process, is that we're going to get back to the community and to our staff with comments on all of the recommendations. Because I think one of the criticisms we heard as we started this was, oh, we're going to make all these recommendations and they're going to sit on a shelf and they're not going to be listened to. So we're going to go back through all the recommendations of the community and all the recommendations from our staff members. And in that case, it's 22 pages of recommendations and answer them and say, yes, you can find it in the budget, or no, it's not here because, or we don't know enough, and we'll work on it. So
would you do this process again next year? Or would there be a need for it?
Well, I think there would hopefully be a need every year to reach out to the community and to our staff to some extent, because they're the folks who are the consumers of the service. Our staff members provide the service. Our residents consume the service. This has been a large process, four workshops, this program, the website, the replays. It's been a lot. I don't know that we're going to be prepared every year to do it to that extent, but I think it's important to check in, and I would look to the City Council for their direction next fall to see what they think might make sense for next year.
And we may also have recommendations from the mayor's panel on
That's
budgeting.
true. That's true.
They will come back and say, we would like to focus on this in the fall of 2010.
Well, gentlemen, I wish you good luck. It's been obviously a long process and somewhat of a difficult one, and it's still not over, but at least hopefully the residents of Evanston now have a little better idea how some of the judgments were made and some of the different suggestions were had. I'm Steve Bartelbaugh. Thank you for joining us here on City Channel 16, and stay tuned as we continue to bring you more in Evanston, your city, as to what's happening. Good night, everyone.